The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring conceived separation. All is truly one, yet most of us are unaware of our extreme suffering, discontent, and loneliness, much less that it originates in the perception of our own isolation. The only way to alleviate this suffering is to bring spirit or a more complete bandwidth of frequencies through the physical body in order to spiritually connect with the physical world and all therein. Ironically, most of us, in our dissatisfaction and loneliness, devote ourselves to trying to further disconnect from our body to find spirit. Well, we can do that when we die. While mental belief systems, unprocessed emotions, and restrictions in physical bodies are contributing factors, spiritual illness is a major component in this extremely detrimental conceived separation from all that is. Spiritual illness results anytime we disconnect from our full bandwidth of frequency or expression. It can be caused by harsh judgment, trauma, and abuse at any age. At birth, the discrepancy of frequency present in the populace on the earth and that of the incarnating spirit most always causes disconnection from our full frequency potential. I've been an avid student of the shamanic way for over 40 years. Through my studies with multiple shamanic teachers from numerous traditions, I come to realize that all levels of the shaman's body, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, engage in the practice of shamanic healing. To perform a shamanic healing, the shaman must be able to align with their client's missing frequency. This requires a very expansive bandwidth of personal frequency to be present in the shaman. Thus, all the intense initiations and processing required in order to engage in the practice. True shaman are actually frequency masters. First, through the use of ritual and trance, the shaman accesses spirit, or, in other words, the quantum level of their client. Here they locate the bandwidth of frequency their client has disconnected from that's causing the presenting problem. The shaman attunes to the missing frequency and then steps them down, much like a transducer, through their own spiritual, mental, emotional, and finally into their physical bodies. Once the shaman brings the frequencies present on all four levels, they offer them to their client to attune to. Interestingly enough, the method of delivering the frequency to the client is most often performed through the breath, by breathing into their physical body through first the heart and then the crown chakra. Some practices use toning in the same way. In indigenous cultures, there was personal practices and ritual performed by the members of the society that provided a means of frequency self-care. Thus, the individual services of a shaman were only necessary in extreme cases during health crises or after an intense trauma. Otherwise, the shamans served as oracles, teachers, spiritual leaders, and performed rituals for the community at large. Unfortunately, in our modern-day societies, most of these self-care methods, as well as much of shamanism, has been lost. Overall, we're extremely disconnected as a culture, creating illness and suffering on all levels, with no curative provision. Our guest this hour is Will Johnson, the founder and program director of the Institute for Embodiment Training, a teaching school that views the body as a doorway, not the obstacle, to spiritual growth and transformation. He's the author of a number of books about the role of the body in spiritual practices. Will's latest book, Eyes Wide Open, Buddhist Instructions on Merging Body and Vision, beautifully provides instruction on lost practices that can help the individual reconnect to their bodies and therefore to life. We'll introduce Will and his impressive work with the body-spirit connection after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Previous, innovative, past episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Will Johnson, author of Eyes Wide Open, Buddhist Instructions on Merging Body and Vision. In this, his latest book, Will eloquently outlines a simple practice that allows us to once again reclaim our birthright of union with all that is. Will's web address is www.embodiment.net. Will, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I'm very happy to be here. And just for starters, I'd like to say, as I listened to your opening teaching, I found it very impactful. You and I have very many common threads here, Gwilda.
Well, this should be a fun hour then. I understand you've been a certified Rolfer since 1976. Now, Will, how do you see this contributing to your view on the importance of the physical body in spiritual practice?
Yeah, well, it's major, of course, and it's fascinating. Yes, I was an early Rolfer. I trained with Ida Rolf. People who know about Rolfing think about it as mostly a kind of form of very, very deep, perhaps physiotherapy. Dr. Rolf was very, very clear that she did not want us just to go down that avenue. Yes, she knew that working deeply on bodies really helps to relieve, some of the pain, some of the suffering, some of the holding and withholding. But she was very, very clear that what she wanted us all to embrace is this notion that if you can play with upright balance through the vertical, what happens? You create a structure that can start letting go of tensions, and from her perspective, that would open, she never used the word spiritual, Gwilda, but she would say it would open evolutionary energies within the human body that would result in the kinds of transformations of consciousness that you speak of so eloquently yourself. So, yeah, my path definitely started there and has continued, working through the body, with the body, focusing on the body as the conduit that helps us recalibrate, get back in touch with, far more wholesome and frankly, a far larger consciousness. In truth, a consciousness that lets go of our conceptions of separation and enters into a direct experience of what some of the mystics, some of the shamans of the world, speak of as the consciousness of union, which it turns out to be our natural state.
Yeah, I love that. How fortunate that you got to work with Ida. I'm jealous. She was just a pioneer in her field.
She was a truly remarkable human being at many, many levels, and I'm very, very happy that I was able to do that.
Yeah, how fortunate. You've also been a Buddhist practitioner since 1972, I believe. And in my training in Tibetan shamanism, I found that was originally attached at the hip to the Buddhist practices. However, at least here in the U.S., the more grounding shamanic practices are glaringly absent from most modern-day Buddhist practices. Can you speak to this?
Yeah, a couple of things that I could say about that. And this is one of the things that I think is going to happen as Buddhism comes into the West. Now, every time that Buddhism has migrated, and it hasn't been very, very often, from India it went into Southeast Asia, up through China and Japan, that could be considered one migration. It goes up over the Himalayas onto the Tibetan Plateau. Coming to the West is the only third migration in Buddhist history. And every time that the Dharma has migrated into a new territory, it hasn't just imposed the old ways. It's embraced the psychological needs and issues of that new territory into the teachings in such a way that the essence is not lost. And my own very, very strong feeling about this is that as the Dharma, as the Buddhist Dharma comes into the West, what they're going to realize is that in some ways they've left the experience, the grounded experience of the body behind. And we are going to re-embrace, rekindle the feeling presence of the body as the doorway, through which, some of the kinds of shifts in awareness. And again, we're going to go back to the theme of this program, from this consciousness where we view everything outside of ourselves as separate into a consciousness that experiences the substratum of union, if you want to call it that pervades all things. And that happens through the body. So for me, it was a very natural shift, starting off with my work with Dr. Rolfe. And so much of what she was talking about was the magic of the vertical upright. If we can bring our bodies into a more predominantly vertical alignment, gravity does something very, very interesting to that body. It actually provides a kind of buoyancy and lift. So I took that very naturally into the experience of sitting meditation practice. The very, very first instruction that the Buddha ever gave on sitting meditation practice was, when you sit down, make sure that you sit in such a way that your spine is erect and upright. And simply establishing or working to play with that predominant, fundamental, structural configuration can be one of the keys, and we'll talk about this more as we get into the program here, can be one of the keys for this kind of transformation from a consciousness of separation into one that is far more imbued with, frankly, everything that is.
Yes, I've absolutely seen this, that the chakric system works then and creates a spiral of sorts that goes right up and down the spine. And the chakric system is what we use to connect with all that is, in one way or the other. It's the way we interact with the quantum level in our realities. It's the way we move our will into the world. And if we are structurally compromised, it inhibits that ability to do it. So I love the postural thing and the making sure that we are tending to that uprightness. And I also really love your statement that spiritual practice is more of an awakening of the body than an examination of the mind. This has absolutely been my experience, both personally and professionally. So would you mind going into that a little bit for our listeners?
Yeah, well, I think that's something that's dawning on many of us as Western students and as Western practitioners. Yes, we're having the extraordinary benefit of all sorts of teachings from traditional spiritual worlds, from the shamanic worlds, teachers who are, coming into the West, and perhaps we're able to hear this or listen with open minds that also have not lost touch with our fundamental experience. Look, for so many of us, our major openings have been very physical. That I've never actually experienced what I would call a large opening without an accompanying bodily component, and that bodily component consists of two things. One, yes, it seems like the structure of the body becomes far more aligned, almost like a lightning rod that I sometimes think of that can connect the energies of heaven with the grounded energies of the earth. And through that, I am able to let go in such a way that allows the release of tension and holding throughout the body. And when that armoring gets released, what you're referring to is these energies of the chakras that are very real and very palpable in very specific locations of the body. It allows them truly to come alive. And when my sense is someone like yourself who works with individual clients, you'll be able to tune in to that body and get a sense of what's dulled, what needs to be rekindled, what needs more vibrancy. If we can kindle an awareness of the body as a unified field of feeling presence, that's when we wake up. And one thing I'd like to add that I think is important for your listeners to hear, I am in no way talking about perfecting anything. This isn't about perfecting perfect posture. It's really about being willing to play with upright balance, just playing within this field of gravity, the sea of gravity that Dr. Rolf would talk about, and working just to make the energy field of the body more concordant with the greater energy field, gravitational energy field of the earth. And to the degree that we do this, this is when some of these very physical openings start happening naturally, but it's not just physical. When we change the physical, the consciousness shifts.
That's such a beautiful point, because as we're able to align with our physical body, then we can connect with the toroidal field of the planet and align with it and evolve with it during these times of greater light. I've noticed now, you must be pretty kinesthetic, Will, as am I. I work pretty much intuitively and through my body as well. I've noticed that people tend to store unprocessed trauma in their bodies. And as a Rolfer and a Buddhist practitioner, can you explain this and how to work with that?
Yeah, what I would go back to is actually, arguably the first somatic therapist from the West, Wilhelm Reich. He was a student of Freud's, and he was the first person from a therapeutic Western point of view who really started delving into the body and into the breath as an agent for, release and growth. Now, Reich believed that what we call the unconscious is not stored in some remote repository in the brain, but is actually stored in the tissues of the body. Now, it's a radical kind of statement, but when you think of it, it makes a lot of sense, and we can get into this in a moment as well. Most of us are literally out of touch with the feeling presence of body, and what I mean by this is that there are minute, shimmering sensations that could be felt to exist on every part of the body, but within this quality of consciousness, the consciousness of separation, we get lost in thought and we block out all awareness of the body. So in a sense, what we've done culturally, bodily presence, the field of body is unified feeling presence. We're completely blind to that. In a sense, we've gone unconscious around it. So it makes sense that that which we are unconscious of, the feeling presence of the body, would be the repository or the storehouse for what we call all these unconscious contents.
That's amazing. Well, unfortunately, I'm going to have to take a commercial break here. We will return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. You want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is the Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Will Johnson, the founder and program director of the Institute for Embodiment Training and the author of Eyes Wide Open. His website, www.embodiment.net. Will, we were talking about how we've disconnected from our bodies to our extreme detriment, in that we cannot connect with all that is on the planet, and therefore we aren't really living a life experience. I mean, if we didn't need to be in our bodies, we wouldn't be given bodies, right? That's kind of the way I look at it. And I wonder, do you think that part of the reason so many of us are not spiritually present in our bodies is a result of the restrictions caused by storing unprocessed things there, emotions, pain, that sort of thing?
Yeah, well, very much so. And, what happens when an emotion comes up and it's too much, or, we just can't deal with it in that moment, what we do, we suppress it, we stuff it, and it does get stored, according to Reich, in the tissues of the body. So the way that could be, resolved or processed through is through an awakening of the body. And my belief very strongly is that we need to awaken the body. Look we're out of a connection, we're out of touch with our bodies. How could we be expected to be in connection with and feel into this deep substratum level that I call the consciousness of union? If we can't even feel the body, we're disconnected with the body first of all. So that seems to be the first and the most important thing that can happen for us. And as we bring bodies back to life, then some of these deeper energies that you're calling the chakras, very real, deep, palpable energies, then we can have greater access to them and awaken them and welcome them back into our experience as well.
Due to 2 years of advanced Rolfing and over 40 years of shamanic practice, I find myself very present on all 4 levels of my body, and I feel a very mobile continuum between me and the world at large. I also find I'm almost always alone, yet rarely lonely. So how can you advise our listeners on simpler methods of achieving this state, shy of 2 years of Rolfing and 40 years in shamanism? There's an easier way, right?
Okay, yeah, and I think there are some very simple things that we can, do to help initiate this shift that we're talking about here today. And I thought, let's do a very, very simple exercise for your listeners. If everybody, let's just start with the body. If everybody would hold out a hand in front of them with the palm up, if you just start paying attention to what's going on in the hand. Initially, some people will start out at the surface. They feel the coolness of the temperature, the weight of the hand. But if you go right into the very middle of the hand, most people eventually are going to start becoming aware of the presence of what I call the field of sensations. It feels vibratory, minute little pinprick blips of sensation that mass together form a flow of sensation. We can feel this. It's palpable. It's real. Now, these sensations do not just exist in the palm. They exist throughout the body. So this is one of the first things that we can all do. We can give ourselves permission. And Gwilda, sometimes I think that the most sophisticated strategy that I have of helping people make this shift is just letting them know that they have permission to feel, that we've lived in a culture that is primarily what I call somatophobic. We're afraid of the potency of the energies of the body. We find it inconvenient, but we squash it at our own peril. As you were saying at the beginning, it's pain, it's illness. So to resurrect the feeling presence of the body, and it's a very, very simple thing to do. Often in my teaching, all I do is start talking about this, and I look around the room, and everybody has suddenly started doing it again. We've given ourselves permission to feel the presence of our body as a unified field of sensation, and as soon as we do that, that's when these kinds of shifts start occurring. So that would be the simplest thing. Yes, sitting practices, doing things like rolfing, different kinds of body-oriented, movement practices. They're wonderful, wonderful, wonderful things to do. But in the beginning, a simple way to become privy to this shift that we're talking about here today is just give yourself permission to, feel the body as this, I call it a unified field of shimmer. Once we become attuned to this vibratory, level of feeling awareness, watch what starts happening at that time.
It's amazing. I think I started referring to my body as a separate entity first when I was starting to learn to be in it. And I started having compassion for it and seeing it as a living, breathing vehicle. And that was the way I kind of initiated my re-entrance into my physical form. Now, you refer to the difference between consciousness of separation and the consciousness of union. Would you share a little bit about this concept with us?
Sure, and we can, pick up right where we left off because it starts with the body. Again, this consciousness of separation, the quality of consciousness that passes as normal in the world at large, it is what I would call, and what Rumi, the great 13th century poet and mystic, the Sufi originator of the dance of the whirling dervish, in his poetry, he refers to this as the consciousness of separation. What typifies this consciousness is two things. One, we are mostly lost in thought and identified with these random thoughts that are like a radio station that's been left on so long that we're not even aware of it, right? And we are lost in thought, and when we are lost in thought, we lose touch with what I was just talking about, this feeling presence, this shimmer, this vibratory presence, of the body. Now, if we're able to start bringing body back to life, and as you're saying, it begins with waking up to the fact that we have this body, and look, maybe we haven't treated it as lovingly, looked after it as well as as it deserves, and we can just start treating ourselves better. We start bringing ourselves more to life. Now, within this consciousness of separation, I believe, and this there's nothing wrong with it. It's just that it's limited and limiting. It's one of the levels, but it's for most of us, this is where we've gotten stuck, where we've gotten caught. We haven't given ourselves permission to step out of it. But within this consciousness of separation, I believe that I am some kind of entity named I that lives inside this physical body. Everything inside is me. Everything that I can view in the visual field, in the physical world outside of me, is other than me. This is truly the consciousness of separation. Now, none other than a luminary like Albert Einstein has viewed that belief that I am something inside here, completely separate from everything outside there. It's a beautiful phrase he uses. He says that is the optical delusion of consciousness, that what's really going on at the level of deeply relaxed and accepted, an honest experience, not conceiving of the world. We conceive of separation, but when we let go of conceptions and get into perceptions, feeling awareness, just bringing the sensations to life, softening, relaxing, viewing the visible world, what starts happening is that this strange kind of interaction starts occurring where the physical field of the body, the visual field of the world start intermingling, start interacting, and we just very naturally enter into this other dimension, this other perspective that Rumi refers to as the consciousness of union. And Rumi is very, very clear about this, that is the only place where the suffering, the pain, and the grief fall away. We have to let go of the concepts we have of being separate, the concepts of how reality is constructed, and enter into a direct experience of how things are.
That's so beautifully put, Will. It's being present on the planet requires being physically on the planet. And if we aren't physically present in our bodies, we can't connect with each other. We connect through speaking and through mental constructs and this and that, but that deep communion between two people, I found, always takes place on the physical level through the vibratory frequencies of our chakras, of our heart chakra, and if we're not present in our body, we really can't engage there. So I really, really celebrate what you're bringing. We're going to have to take another break. We'll be back on the flip side of this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of services to the world. We can be found on www.thescienceofmagic.net, and I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Will Johnson, the founder and program director of the Institute for Embodiment Training and the author of Eyes Wide Open, his website, www.embodiment.net. Well, you were going into Einstein's as he described the conventional relationship with the visual field that we look out onto as the optical delusion of consciousness. I really, really love that. Can you go into it just a little more for us?
Yeah, what Einstein is getting at is that we have a belief that the visual field that I look out onto is forever completely separate from who I am. Now look, on the level of what we conventionally call physical reality, that's true. There is this physical body that I seem to be inhabiting, and there's all the other objects out in the the visual field that are in fact separate from that physical body. But from the perspective of experience, once we kindle awareness of body as this unified field of shimmering vibratory sensation, that distinction between what is exclusively me and what is separate from me, it just starts melting away. It's simply what it does. And we realize that the visual field Yes, it's just a field. Now, this is not to say that the physical objects that I perceive in the visual field live inside me, but it's certainly to say that my perception of that visual field is very conjoined with my experience, so that when we're able to embrace this, and it is really quite simple, it's just giving oneself permission, just feel the body and relax into the visual field. Let the visual field enter you, feel the physical body, which starts radiating, emanating, and merging with the visual field, and we realize there's this whole other dimension, and this other dimension just is very wonderful for those of us that have given ourselves permission to enter into it, right? And Einstein was very, very clear, evidently, that this other dimension exists, that there is some kind of substratum that ties the apparently separate and diverse components of the universe back into a unified dimension of experience. And many of us, the work that you're doing in the shamanic field, the work that many people are doing in many of the other spiritually oriented fields, we're becoming privy to this dimension. Look, we are not pulling bunnies out of a hat here. We're just talking about another dimension of embodied consciousness that's available to every one of us if we give ourselves permission to resurrect the feeling presence of the body, and then to just start relaxing into a perception of experience and letting go of our conceptions of how we believe things are constructed.
I love the way you put that, because one thing that I've found when I'm doing medical intuitive is, one, I merge just like that. And then with my visual field, I can start to see where the resonance or dissonance is going on between the frequency or the communion that I have going with the planet at large and the individual that's presenting in front of me. One of the things that's always fascinated me is how people tend to see what they expect to see. And if it's not in their experience, they may not see it at all. Does this play in here, and if so, how?
Yeah, well, certainly it does. If we have an expectation of how anything is supposed to be or how reality is constructed, that's how we're going to view it. The other thing that gets fascinating about this, Gwilda, is that when we give ourselves permission to make that shift back into a more embodied experience, we feel these vibratory currents, these shimmers throughout the entire body. When body comes alive as a field of shimmering sensation, what you start looking out onto, a blank wall, for example, I challenge people to try to convince me that that wall looks flat, that it's not alive in vibratory frequency. We start seeing into this, and this is not special vision. It's just simply what happens for someone who's able to tune into these dimensions of felt awareness themselves. When we start feeling our body as vibratory, we start seeing, the visible world as vibratory. And it's through, I think, that vibratory quality where this merging starts happening. And certainly, I'm imagining from the point of view of a medical intuitive like yourself, you can, work with someone and be in the presence of that body, and you'll be able to see where there's a lot of aliveness, where there's a lot of awakening, and where there's a lot of dullness. You can actually see this. And again, I really want listeners to get this is not some kind of special gift that someone like you or someone like me has. It's just the available visioning for anybody who gives themselves permission to start really experiencing themselves and letting go of how we think it is, right?
It is. It's about be here now, be present, be physically present.
Exactly.
Will, would you mind sharing with the listeners where they can find your books?
Yes, they're all available on Amazon.com. They should be all available at the major, booksellers. You either order them directly through Amazon.com or through the major booksellers. I do sell them through my website. My encouragement, though, would be for people. I'm a big supporter of local booksellers. So you can order them through them or through Amazon.com, but all of them are available. Virtually all of them deal with, frankly, what we've been talking about here today, the role of the body in spiritual practice, specifically in sitting meditation practices, although many of them do deal with the Sufi mystic Rumi, but he was extremely body-oriented in his practices.
Yes, that's what I've heard about him. I just, again, I haven't studied him as much as I would like to, because he does so relay the importance of being physically here and physically present. Do you have something you'd like to share with our listeners?
Okay, I was thinking about this, and one last extraordinarily potent and very, very simple thing to do with your friend, with your partner, with anyone really, to start making this shift into the experiential dimension and breaking down the barriers of separation. And this is one of Rumi's practices. He and his great friend Shams spent 3 months in retreat together, and by the accounts that you can read from the poetry, you know what they were doing, Gwilda? They were sitting across from each other. They were looking at each other. They were gazing into each other's eyes, and they were just letting go and softening and allowing what starts happening. If the people who are listening to this program will start doing that with your partners, you're going to find it as probably one of the most extraordinary things that you've ever done. You'll get large surges of sensation, the visual fields start shifting, and ultimately you can actually feel yourself really merging heart to heart, soul to soul, spirit to spirit with this being that is supposedly other than you. And you start, both of you together, grounding into this magical birthright dimension of union.
Beautifully put. Well, time goes so fast and we're out of it. So thank you so much for being with us on The Science of Magic. This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love, and live in unity.